Yes, the steering's very tight. There is no lag here at all on the steering, which is always a good thing. I do think there's a danger of torque steer with this car though, especially accelerating out of corners. It feels very reflexive, and that's not always a good thing because it puts the control of the car down to the road conditions rather than the actual driver. Now the interior is quite solid, well built, doesn't feel cheesy and tacky like a lot of Japanese cars can. Dashboard's very solid, feels like it's made out, almost carved out of solid rubber. Center console, very basic, but at the end of the day we want that when we're driving down the road. We want to be able to operate the heating and everything else without taking our eyes off the road, so that's fine by me as far as I'm concerned. The wing mirrors, side mirrors, okay, the visibility is good, there's no problem seeing where I've been, but if I had any criticism about those at all, I would say they're sticking way too far out from the car, and I don't quite understand why they're like that. Rear view vision's pretty good, back window's pretty small, but you can see what's going on at the back, and the headrests don't obstruct the vision. However, if there were 3 people in the back, I think you'd be stuffed. The instrument cluster is very well illuminated, and it's not obstructed by the steering wheel, which is very common in a lot of cars. This is the 5-speed manual, and I must admit the gears do actually feel rather tight, which is always a nice bonus when you've got a car. The interior there is a danger of it being a bit bland, to be fair, and the upholstery on the chairs, it does resemble office furniture, so it's certainly void of personality, and it's not really very exciting at all. The car is not particularly responsive. I think well, in fact there is a danger of this car being underpowered, and because of that I personally would like to have seen a 6th gear on this vehicle, which is very, very common now, and it's a shame it's not here. But one thing that's really being fed to me at the moment is the smoothness of the ride. The ride is very smooth. It's almost like a boat skimming across water, planing across water. It just drives along effortless. The brakes are feeling a little bit grabby though, which is common with small hatchbacks, especially Fiestas. Now as I accelerate out the corner, there's a lot of torque steer there. The steering's being pulled over. You don't like that. You don't get that in every front wheel drive, but it's certainly prevalent of this car. But as it travels through the gears, the transition is very, very nice. There's no jumping in and out of gear, no jolting of the car. It really is a very nice drive. In fact, this car is so easy to drive. It's almost got the characteristics and the driving mannerisms of a large luxury saloon. If I give the steering a bit of a wiggle, the car doesn't roll around much at all. It certainly doesn't meander. A lot of larger cars, they feel like they're articulated, they snake about a bit, but this one's very, very, very firm. It's not a sport suspension, but I'd feel very confident that I could control this car in a skid, or if I had to do an emergency swerve in a motorway lane at speed. The car does feel like it complements your driving intentions and instructions, and it flies through the corners actually and hugs the road very, very well. I'm quite impressed with the stability of the vehicle. It really is a very positive ride. All in all, this is a very, very good car to drive, and I would feel very comfortable to drive this car a long distance. It's certainly not a tiring car to drive. It's well put together, it's well engineered. The only criticism I really will stick with is the fact that I think the engine is a little underpowered on acceleration, so if you were pulling out at junctions or at a roundabout where you needed to get up to speed and get into the flow of traffic, I think you'd have problems with the acceleration. And also travelling on a motorway, if one was to overtake, say, a lorry in the rain and wanted to hurry past and get past that, it just doesn't have the it's really struggling to get anywhere. So my advice to anybody thinking about buying one of these is You certainly don't want to go for the automatic with this engine size, because then it's going to be even more underpowered. It's worthwhile going for something more torquey, something with more mid-range torque especially, which you might find in the diesel. And I would seriously emphasize that the necessity for a larger engine would be a very wise choice indeed. Now hopefully I can get to do a 0 to 60 test in a moment. 3, 2, 1. And that's 60. I mean, that's a perfect example. It's an open road dual carriageway, and it just struggles to get there. So you want to go for a bigger engine. Don't worry about the shocks. The shocks are very firm. Unfortunately, I can't tell you what this is like in the wet because the conditions are dry, but the steering is very responsive. It's very, very tight. It's one of the best steerings I've come across in the front wheel drive. I suspect you're going to have a lot of understeer, but the torque steer is a big issue. Now I'm coming to a roundabout now, and I'm just going to demonstrate that to you. I have had worse reflexive steerings, but let's see what this one's like now. Sometimes they jolt back to straighten up so aggressively that I think it could be a serious danger. So around the roundabout now, accelerating out. Yeah, it's a little bit reflexive there, so that could be an issue for some people, and you'd want to keep your hands firmly on the steering wheel, because at the end of the day there are times when the steering wheel is going to take over control. So that is an issue, so please bear that in mind, especially if you're not too keen on front wheel drives. But it has to be said, this vehicle is very, very good, and it's got the build quality, it's got the drivability. It's certainly one of the better ones out there. Is it better than a small BMW 1 Series? I'd have to say no. Is it better than a Ford Fiesta? Definitely 100%.